Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Clouds, Edge to Edge Transformation. And transformation often has to begin from within so that we can work productively, meaningfully, effectively with all the people that we work with. And that's where mentors, coaches, advisors come in. And one of the most amazing person that I got to work with as an executive coach is Bea when I was at Intel. Bea, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you become the Bea that we all know today? Or were you born like this?
Hi, Shankar. It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me. How did I become the person I am today? I started at Intel in 1999 as a software tester, and that was hard for me. While I have some, logic understanding, I'm not that technical, and so it was always a difficult road. 7 years in, I became the manager of that group. And as part of my manager development training, I attended a class called Coaching for Excellence. And we got to actually practice coaching in that class. And when I saw the light go on in my coachee's face, and she said to me, "Oh, I never thought about it like this." I had my own aha experience, and I thought, "Oh, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life." And so after the class, I went to the instructor and I said, "How do I become a coach?" And I went to my manager and said, "Hey, how about some budget for coaching education?" It took still a few years. I did whatever I could do in order to prepare myself. And then in 2011, 2012, I went to professional coaching education. And since then have been coaching executives and leaders at Intel.
What I like about your coaching, Bea, is that you have many different modalities that you use, not just what you learned in coaching school. You bring a very integrative approach. Can you get into that a little bit? Can you tell us your secret sauce?
My secret sauce, what has really worked well for me, and that's why I think I want to pass it on to others, is somatic coaching. So anything involving the body, because we tend to live in our heads, right? We have the head intelligence, and in corporate America, that's usually typically where we live, and we forget we have a body. There is also heart intelligence and there's gut intelligence. And so how do we bring those two back online? And with somatic practices, and you and I did some of those in our coaching together. And I think once you have your 3 intelligence centers and can draw from those, you have more data to make better informed decisions. And I am a very strong proponent of somatic coaching. I feel when the body has understood something, this is an anchor in the body, and you can draw on that, and it will help you change your behaviors. That is my secret sauce, one of them.
Thank you for sharing. At Intel, we are a huge technology company. We brought PCs and all kinds of devices to everybody. In what ways has this changed people's lives, both on the job front as well as at home? And how is it from a mental health perspective, or even, being joyful, being productive? What's your opinion on that, having seen it from inside out?
Well, actually, let me ask you, since we went through coaching together, what has changed in your life?
I've been much more mindful, and especially when I'm working, long hours, such as all these interviews. Every single time before I get into something important like this, I learn to breathe, be with nature, be grounded, and tell myself that the reason I'm doing this is so that it's good for everybody, not just for me. It's not just a marketing gimmick, it's a way to bring people together. So everything I do, I bring that perspective, and it is very much somatic, whether it's breathing, walking, being in nature, or exercise. And so that has helped tremendously. Our work together served as a reminder to be mindful. I do use technology because I can't run away from it. Technology is fantastic. I use even ChatGPT, Google Bard, a lot of the tools to clean up and to create good quality work. But I'm also very grounded. I'm not obsessed with technology, and I take frequent breaks. What do you see when you work with so many people?
Yeah, great. So it sounds like you found a balance between technology and the mindful approach and being grounded to a particular situation, or more grounded than you might have been otherwise. So for me, in my own experience, it's similar. I also have a meditation background of many years, and that has been helping me a lot getting back to my center. Because I always say that it's not about being perfect and never falling off our center. We always fall off our center, right? It just depends how quickly can we recover. And so when I look at my own process, I have been able to recover faster than previously. So getting back to center a little bit faster, and definitely using my body for that as well. I have different breathing exercises, or even postures, different postures or gestures that help with grounding. And those are things that I also apply in my coaching practices. I tend to look at people and see how do they show up in conversation, and somebody leaning forward a lot, right? And what is the energy like? Is it very frantic? I notice that and say, hey, here's what I'm observing. And what would it look like if you actually leaned back and took a few breaths and then have that conversation from that point of view? And things change, the energy changes in a person. And what it gives us, the self-awareness, what it gives us is choice points, that we get to a point where we can say, oh, here it is again. Here's that behavior that I've been trying to change. And I want to do something differently. And now I can decide, do I go down the old way? And I know what the implications are of that. Or am I going to try a new behavior and see what happens? So that choice point, I think, is really important. That comes with self-awareness, with mindfulness, with presence. And then I get to go down a different path if I choose to do that. It's all about intention, right? It's about conscious choosing. And yeah, it takes work. It's not that easy because our brain is used to working in a particular way. We've done that for, X decades in our lives. So, yep, that's what we are used to. And I read in a book recently about why the brain does that. It goes on automatic because it tries to save energy. The biological function of the brain is doing these things on autopilot so that we have energy, it's saving energy. And that's why sometimes it's hard to change things, because changing things means we actually have to intentionally practice, and that takes more energy. So it's all about intentional practice.
Speaking of practice, if you remember, one of my big goals was to become a better listener. And now
Yes.
that I've been interviewing, I've learned to listen and really be patient. And guess what? In my day to day life, I pretend like I'm interviewing the whole world, and I become a
That's
better listener.
that's great.
And
Yeah.
you saw me leaning forward in the past, and I'm like, now I'm much more relaxed. And, well, the learning begins when we begin to listen. So thank you for
Yeah.
that. There's so much technology. Is it possible to use some of this technology to get to that balance, to find meaning and to find a sense of purpose? Or is technology always going to sway us in a direction that's not helpful?
Well, I don't think it's an either or. I think it's how you use technology, right? And how much we get sucked into technology. And it's easy. Even, I also have to be careful with how much time I spend on social media or those types of things, because they're addictive. So there has to be some cutoff where I say, okay, enough is enough. Finding that balance, again, takes self-awareness, takes some choice, and moving into, okay, now it's time for going out for a walk or doing some exercise. right? So I think, yeah, technology is super useful. I also use ChatGPT. I found a few coaching tools as well where you can actually practice coaching. There's a scenario that's given, and then you're the coach and you can practice with an AI. So I thought that was interesting, and I'm playing with that a bit. That can help improve coaching skills to a certain degree. AI also completely freaks me out because I'm wondering, where is this going to go in the future? And at the same time, I think turning a blind eye to it is not the right way, at least for me. I am also part of a coach collective that looks at different AI possibilities and what's happening in the coaching world specifically around AI. So I try to keep a foot, in that world, or dip my toe into that world. Maybe that's a better way to say it. And yeah, so it's a both and.
And the presence of AI in various aspects of our life is also creating a lot of anxiety for people in every aspect of their job. Whether it's a programmer or a marketing person or a legal assistant or a
Yeah,
lawyer, what's the right attitude to have during all these potential career transitions? And how does somebody deal with all that anxiety and use it in a productive way rather than succumb to it and feel paralyzed?
that's a big question. I sometimes have anxiety around that too, and I'm wondering, where is this all going to go? Um, I think AI will probably replace anything that has a particular system. If there is a step-by-step thing, then that's an easy thing to replicate with AI. I don't know how this is going to look in the future. We've had industrial revolution before, and that replaced a whole bunch of people's jobs, and it also created new jobs. So maybe with AI, it's a similar thing. It's going to do away with a bunch of jobs, and in some way, shape, or form, it's going to create some new jobs. One thing I'm particularly concerned about is personal connection. Like, how might that change with AI? So if people don't relate to each other anymore, that I see as a potential problem in just how do we get along as human beings in the world. If we can only talk to an AI and not to another human being, and how are we going to manage our conflicts and disagreements? Yeah, there's a little bit of concern there, and I'm wondering how that's all going to turn out. And in some way, I actually think that helping professions might become really important in that way, in order to help people to communicate with each other better, which then takes me to my whole communication theory and I really love the work that Marshall Rosenberg brings to the table, the nonviolent communication, where he says that everything human beings do, we do because we want to meet one or more of our needs. And the strategies that we choose in order to meet those needs can be skillful or can be not so skillful, right? And so in my coaching, I like to also look at those. What are those needs for the coachee, and for the person that they are dealing with in their lives or their situations? And then how do we manage that better? How do we learn how to name those needs? How do we manage those needs, those emotions? And how does that lead to better communication, better connection?
Thank you. You brought out many different points and expressed even your own vulnerability as all these technologies take over. It is time to really think through and feel it and say, yes, we're getting all this technology and automation, and are we losing something? One of the interesting things that one of the top AI researchers said to me is that it's fun to watch robots play volleyball or soccer for some time. But is that what we want to do the rest of our life, watching robots play with each other or
Yeah.
robots taking care of everything and we just sit and drink beer? Probably not. So his point was that the need for human connection actually increases
Yeah.
We can't be in front of computers all the time. It'll be such a lonely world. It already is as people sit down with their social media.
Yeah.
So the need for human connection actually grows. Don't you think that the need for emotional intelligence will actually grow when
Absolutely. Yeah.
logical tasks, a lot of so-called step-by-step tasks will be done by machines?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we've already seen the need for connection. That human beings are wired for connection is something that Brene Brown says. And we've seen that during COVID. To not have that connection, that was really hard for many people. Maybe a little bit easier for introverts, but the rest of, humankind definitely had a hard time with that. I call myself an ambivert. I'm introverted in terms of I need to recharge by myself. Even I noticed that I was missing connection. So I think COVID gave us an example of, yes, human beings do need connection. And I agree with what you said. The more we deal with technology, the more the need for emotional intelligence and connection. And how do we manage our disagreements in particular? Right? How do we reflect back what we've heard another person say? One thing that I teach in a workshop is this methodology called Listen, Reflect, and Ask. It came from a cohort program that we're running at Intel called the Leadership Fitness Coaching Program. And that is about teaching leaders how to listen better. And the big part in listening, I think, is in the reflecting part. We often forget to reflect back what we heard the other person say, and we often don't want to reflect something back because we think, oh, if I acknowledge what the other person is saying, then the other person is going to think I'm going to agree with them. But acknowledgement and agreement are two very different things. And so I try to make that distinction very clear. So that listening part is what we need to hone in on, all of us, really, I think, as a human race. And what that will give us is a better connection. You're going to feel heard, you're going to feel understood, and whatever comes next, we will be much more open to hearing what the other person has to say at that point.
Thank you for giving me the tools to practice listening. It has made a huge difference in my work, my life, and I'm back on the path of learning, because if I'm just talking, then I won't know what other people have to say. And the more I interview people, the more I want to interview. It may go on for the rest of my life, because that there's so much deep learning when I listen to the experts on a variety of topics.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the fact that there seems to be an epidemic of loneliness, which began apparent during COVID times, but it's continuing. And there's also an epidemic of too much of technology, which may even prevent us from connecting. Is there some way we can reverse this trend and go in a direction that's much more meaningful?
Yeah, that's a good question. Loneliness, systemic loneliness. I don't think there's a simple solution. I think it is about connecting, self-awareness, knowing what are the implications of me spending too much time with technology. What does that mean for my life? And I think we all have to figure that out for ourselves, but we have to start asking ourselves those questions. If we just go with the flow on automatic, then it's not going to change. So something has to snap us out of our autopilot and help us ask those questions. And sometimes maybe that is life itself, right? It maybe brings us some illness or an accident or job loss or some crisis, divorce, right? Some crisis or death in some way, shape, or form that wakes us up out of our autopilot mode and says, oh, there's something else out here. It's not just about technology. It's not just about getting things done. right? So what is important? So that can help us reset a little bit. And I think also we have our particular habits and behavior patterns, ways that practices that we engage with or in, and they turn us into a particular kind of person, right? That builds our character. And then based on that is we pay attention to certain things. And it's sort of that cycle, right? And at some point there has to be this crisis that interrupts that cycle that helps us to wake up and say, okay, I need to do something differently. And then I can start paying attention to something different that then helps to shape me in a different way, right? Start doing different habits, develop different patterns, and help me show up differently as a human being.
The usual mantra is go with the flow, but you reminded me that often we go with the flow with automatic patterns. So, in other words, mindlessly going with the flow, and that's
Yeah.
not helpful.
Yeah.
So, one question to you about learning through sharing, giving. You have been in technology for many years and then many more years in coaching now. Are you the same Bea who started off? Were you always so self aware, or were there changes along the way? What were the gifts you received when you supported others in being more mindful and being more conscious? In what ways has that changed your life?
Oh, lots of changes. I'm definitely not the same person that I was many years ago, even a few years ago. Self-awareness has made a big difference and is continuing to make a big difference. I don't think that I can say I have arrived. It's not about that. For me, the path, like the journey, is the goal, right? So just peeling back those layers, because there's always another layer that can be peeled back. And it's never going to stop for me. Maybe it slows down at some point because there's times when you need to integrate your learnings, right? And when it's time to integrate, then there's less going out and searching for new material or new development, right? It's just, okay, I need to just sit and metabolize and integrate what has happened and what I've learned, and actually practice that and make that part of my DNA. Yeah. And so for me, I don't know if you know the Enneagram. I'm a Enneagram 2, the helper or caretaker. So for me, it's all about getting out of other people's business, not stepping in and helping when I'm not asked for help. That's important. And one mantra I have been telling myself that's actually worked very well is not my circus, not my monkeys. So I'm trying to remember that when I want to step in again and say, oh, I know what to do. I can help you with this. And I think the coaching in some way has actually also been very good for me, because coaching is not about providing solutions. Coaching is about guiding somebody else to self-discovery. And so it's not for me to find the solution for the other person. It's for me to ask the questions and elicit their wisdom, and provide a different perspective, right? Help them see a different perspective, and then they can find their own solution path. So that also helped me with staying in my lane.
Another question is about work from home. There are many amazing gifts. I have worked from exotic destinations, even when I'm traveling, and I think you have done similar things. But it's also the lack of communication, being with your colleagues, being with your customers, vendors, face to face. So it's all on Zoom or all on Teams. What's a good way to balance that out? And have you figured out how to use the advantages of being working from home or working from different places at the same time staying in touch with people?
Yeah, there is definitely a difference when you meet in person. There is just a different type of connection. So when somebody is in the spot that I'm in, then I try to go and meet them in person, and even sometimes just meet somebody for lunch or for coffee. right? So making that connection, I think, is important. Or if there's team meetings, lunches that are organized, or some team get together at some point, then I make a point of going to work and actually meeting people in person. Otherwise, I have to say the Zoom is actually working really well for me. With the classes that we teach, we can reach a wider audience through Zoom instead of just on campus, right? So I like that diversity aspect, that we can include more people. And I'm not feeling too lonely with my colleagues because we're talking all the time and usually have our cameras on. That's the other thing. We just have our cameras on by default, pretty much. And I also ask that when I'm teaching classes that people turn their cameras on, because there is still a different connection than just seeing somebody's black little square, right, with their name on it. That's very impersonal and not conducive for coaching either. So different ways to work around that. And in general, it works well for me because I have private conversations all the time. I also have a number of monitors set up for me. So how would that work at work when I don't have a desk anymore? And I'd have to find a conference room or a phone booth, and then I'd be in that phone booth sitting all the time. Versus here, I can sit or stand, or I even have a treadmill under my desk. So it's a much better setup than I would have at work.
And that's good use of technology. It's always a joy talking to you, Bea. Do you have anything to add to how people can have more enriching, fulfilling lives and careers?
The one thing I would say is really use all your intelligence centers, head, heart, and gut. And don't forget your body. Your body is really important. It's your vehicle in this life that takes you and helps you do whatever it is that you want to do. So be kind to it, treat it well, listen to it, and it will serve you well.
Thanks again, Bea. Dankeschön, and to everybody listening out there. This is why I talk to people from around the world in different ways, different times, because no one has a crystal ball or an ultimate solution. And in learning to listen to others, to bring different viewpoints as well as different ways of living together, we can co-create a much richer future. I'm quite optimistic about technology, but the intentionality, as Bea said, is important. So please come forward, tell us your stories. Thank you all for being a part of this extended family. We're all learning together. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your willingness to participate. And let's be grateful that we're still living in a world where we can communicate and be with each other now more so than ever before. Thanks again, Bea, for reminding us to not just have our intelligence here, but be embodied throughout the body.
You're welcome, Shankar. Thank you for having me. It was great talking to you again.